Shields up, Ironbreakers, and welcome back to Monster Hunter Wilds. We've recently had the deployment of Free Title Update 4 applied onto the game, which also marks the last major update that Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be receiving. It's not the last update per se, but just the one that is going to include a decent chunk of content to the game as per the Monster Hunter team. So with this title update, we've gotten Festival of Accord Lumen Hymn, we've gotten Gogmazios, we've gotten a bunch of training quests, which were actually pretty cool. I haven't done all of them yet. We did the water-based one. It's just, we're coming up on the Christmas holidays, so time is a luxury that I really just don't have. So pretty much whenever you see me playing the game, those are the only times I actually get to play the game. But, we've been spending quite a bit of time farming Gogmazios, obviously, because that is the endgame system. And today I figured I'd just talk a little bit about my thoughts with Title Update 4. So, without any further ado, let's get right into the meat and potatoes of this update, which is Gogmazios. A lot of people have been jumping on stream asking me for my opinion on the monster fight itself. And basically, the way that I look at Gogmazios is I feel like he is at exactly the difficulty level that you should be for a final entry of a baseline game. Even though technically speaking, he's not the final entry because we still have Arc-Tempered Arc-Veld, but you guys get the idea. I'm talking about the final entry of a new monster. Now, I suspect that they might still add like a tempered version of him, which would be a little bit harder and it would be mostly done just for the challenge. But I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, they need to make it giga hard or whatever. Like, I've already had my moment of having a super hard monster, so I'm pretty happy with Wild's difficulty at this point because, we had Savage Omega, which really tested my ability to its limits. We really just went all out, and even if we were to do Savage Omega right now on stream with people that have done it before, success is not guaranteed, and that is something that I really appreciated about Savage Omega. It is that, it gave you room for failure. Now with Gogmazios, we also failed quite a few quests, and I still cart in Gogmazios from time to time, but I kind of feel like success is much more guaranteed, and to be honest, I don't think it needs to be much harder than this. Gogmazios is meant to be a spectacle fight, kind of like Zoshia. You guys remember when we fought Tempered Zoshia? And all that stuff when that was added, I forget if that was in the 8.5 update or after or before or something like that. But the Zoshia fight was awesome. Really enjoyed Zoshia fight, and I really enjoyed Gogmazios' fight, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy it. Now, having said that, there are a couple of things that I feel could be improved when it comes to Gogmazios before we even engage with the Gogma-Artian upgrade system, because there's a lot of improvements that could be made there, and I'm going to be giving guys my feedback on how I feel about those systems. But in regards to Gogmazios' fight itself, one of the things that I would like is for the state that the monster is in to be communicated more organically. Now, I understand that the state is communicated organically, but in the middle of all the chaos of having 4 other hunters there, which the fight is clearly designed to be done in multiplayer. Whether you do it in multiplayer or not is going to be completely up to you. There's also the companions, the support hunters that you can have for those of you that prefer to play solo. As a matter of fact, I've heard from a lot of people in my live stream that they happen to be more reliable than players, since players sometimes cart, and that actually costs you attempts and stuff like that. But me personally, I've been doing it with a lot of you guys in the Ironbreaker lobby, and it's just been fine. Sure, we failed the occasional one, but it's not really a big deal, and we all have a good laugh about it afterwards, so who cares? But overall, we've been fairly successful throughout most of the attempts that we've done. It's not super hard to farm or anything like that. But if you don't want to play with other players, you can do it with the support hunters, and it's perfectly doable. And like I said, some people even say that is actually easier to do. So, but to me, I would like for the state that the monster is in to be communicated more organically, as opposed to during liquid state, there's just a tooltip that pops up. And I've never been a big fan of those, right? I want to be able to look at the monster, because that's always been what Monster Hunter is about. Monster is limping, that he's at sub 25% health, monster is drooling, he's hungry, and that also if you trap him, the effectiveness is better, etc., etc. You guys know the deal when it comes to reading monster behavior, or at least you should by now if you've been playing Monster Hunter long enough, and if you don't, it's fine. But that's what I'm talking about, right? I want to be able to read the monster better. And amidst the chaos of the Gogmazios fight, I find it very hard to just see organically what state the monster is in, because there's too many particle effects, there's too many players, because there's 8 hunters in this hunt, technically speaking, even though only 4 of them are actually playable. The rest of them are going to be support hunters, which is another interesting thing. Us finally breaking the rule of 4. I think Capcom's experimenting. Potentially next Monster Hunter we'll see actual 8-player raids, so to speak. Who knows if that's going to be a thing or not, but it's definitely an interesting concept, and I'm curious to see it explored. But overall, the fight itself of Gogmazios feels absolutely phenomenal. My biggest thing is definitely the whole being able to read the monster more clearly, the states that he's in, without having to rely on tooltips or NPCs shouting out the solution to me. I find that obviously the fight is a little bit more scripted, so for those of you that plan on farming it 300 times, you know, things will eventually be getting a little bit old. I don't necessarily plan on farming him 300, 500 times or whatever, because I also find that the Gog-Ardian system, which is the system that you're expected to engage in when it comes to this boss to really min-max your weapons, I'm just not a big fan of Gogma-Artian, right? And we'll get into that a little bit further ahead, but I don't think I'm really going to get tired of Gogmazios. Now, beyond being able to read his state better, whether he's solid, liquid, gaseous, whatever, another thing that I think should be done, and people are not going to like that I'm going to say this, but like those compact wyvern weapons, like the little laser blasts you get to shoot, those are just way too powerful. Like, I'm sorry, you get to a point when you're at the 3rd phase where it's like, oh, is there a compact wyvern cannon there? Fire that thing, because that is like the most damage you can do, which is, it's just insane. And not to mention its dragon damage, which is going to get you through the DPS threshold faster. So if you're struggling on phase 3, really what you got to do is just use your slinger, shoot him as much as you possibly can, make sure to charge those shots, and you're likely going to be hitting that threshold without too many issues. At least that's been my experience so far. But I do think that those things are way too powerful. Like, if you line up your shots correctly, you can get upwards of 700 damage during certain parts, which, if you just think about it, oh, so I charge a little bit and I just deal 700 damage on a flying monster? That's crazy. Now, I know that a lot of people are also upset with the fact that the monster has a flying phase. I really don't mind that much, because, you know, you're firing the lasers. I just kind of wish that maybe deal less damage, but contribute more to the lower the elemental threshold or something. I don't know exactly what type of adjustments should be done. I just feel like the damage is too much. But that's pretty much most of the feedback that I have about the Gogma fight. One of the things that I really like about Gogmazios' fight, by the way, because, you know, I'm just saying some of the feedback that I have in terms of like not negative, but like constructive feedback of my thoughts about the fight, right? But one of the things that I really, really love about this fight is firing the big laser, or Elder Breaker, whatever the damn thing is called. That thing is just so brutally satisfying. It is fantastic. And I love the fact that this pulls from, you know, stuff that I always talk about this whenever there's something that requires you to actually try and do something before firing a big gun. Like, it just feels very rewarding, and they do that with the Elder Breaker. You have to connect the wormway nodes or whatever, but it just reminds me of Lost Planet 2, when you would have somebody go over and pick up the shells to load in the cannon, then somebody else would be aiming the cannon, and so on and so forth. Those types of things, I don't know why, but I just really like them. I like that type of teamwork. I like that type of stuff implemented onto a fight. I know that a lot of people that play Monster Hunter, they're like, I just want my uptimes, and it's like, I don't care about your uptime, to be quite frank. I just want to have fun, and having to like charge up this big gun to then fire in the monster's face and just seeing what happens after the gun is fully charged is incredibly satisfying. So that moment, I think, is really, really cool. Another really cool moment, I feel, is whenever he is doing his big ultimate attack in the 3rd phase and you hit the threshold. You hit the threshold, and if you happen to be a shield weapon user, you basically get to block But you don't just get to block for yourself, you get to block for your whole team. So you can stand in front of the big explosion that's coming, you hold your shield like the big protector, people can hide behind you and there's like a safe zone. Reminds me of Passage of Arms in Final Fantasy XIV, if anybody's familiar with that. And it's just, which by the way might be influenced considering that, you know, Capcom's been doing all these collabs with Final Fantasy XIV, so who knows if this was not inspired by the Paladin Passage of Arms. I don't know if that's the case or not. But regardless of that, it's just a really, really satisfying moment. The fight overall, I think, is extremely fun. I like the mechanic of swapping weapons so that you actually end up utilizing both of your weapons, even if, you know, I swap weapons in the fight, but the reality is I play a gun lance. My elemental contribution is not particularly good, so whatever, who cares? But yeah, Gogmazios, big W, loved fighting him. This is the first time I fought him. I never really fought him in For Ultimate. I don't know how people feel that I fought him in For Ultimate, if they think that this is an adequate, you know, glow up of Gogmazios or not. Do let me know in the comment section down below. I'm super curious to hear from you. Now, let's talk about the Gogma-Artian system. So Gogma-Artian system builds on top of the already existing Ardian system that we've had. I was not a fan of the Ardian system to begin with, and naturally I'm not the biggest fan of Gogma-Artian. I'm not saying that it's bad, because I know that there are a lot of players that just want to gamble on that RNG and go, just like there were people that absolutely adored the Curious crafting system in Rise and Sunbreak, and it was just not my thing, because I just find it to be far too random. Now, in the case of Gogma-Artian weapons, now you get to roll for an additional set bonus as well as an additional group bonus. So these are two things that are completely random that will get assigned to your weapon. You can re-roll them as much as you want. And then on top of it, there's 5 random stats that you can get for your weapon, such as affinity, attack, elemental damage, sharpness, yada, 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 right? If you already have perfect rolled Ardians, you don't really lose those, because you can just keep those bonuses and keep rolling them so that they become stronger. But the thing is, they don't really become stronger incrementally. It's just random. So you spend 20 aura calcite, you roll the bones, and you hope for the best, and then you just keep rolling until hopefully eventually you get an upgrade. Now, in my case, when it comes to Gogma-Artian weapons, there's an additional added twist on top, because I play the gun lance. One of the best shelling styles that we've had throughout the entirety of Monster Hunter Wilds has been the wide shelling style. Now, when it comes to upgrading from Ardian weapon into Gogma-Artian weapon, you have to choose 3 paths. So you can either go the path of raw damage, which is the preferable path for pretty much every single shelling style when it comes to gun lance, or you can go the affinity path, which doesn't really do much for us because a lot of our damage comes from shelling and shells don't crit, or you can go the elemental path, which doesn't really do well. I guess Gunlance can do some elemental damage with some of its pokes and all of that stuff, but ultimately we really just kind of want a shell, so raw damage is kind of the default way to go. And what they've done is they've associated each of these modifiers, so attack, affinity, or elemental, with a specific shelling style, which in a way is good because it lets you choose what shelling style you want for your Gogma-Artian weapon, but another way it's bad because we all want raw damage for every shelling style pretty much. And not being able to get that means that, you know, you're effectively gimping yourself a little bit. And wide shelling, which is the best one, got elemental. And basically when you're playing wide shelling, you're very rarely resorting to elemental damage. Elemental doesn't really contribute anything for shelling, and this is the strongest shelling style because this is where you use charged shells. This is where you use, you know, Wyvern Fire is at its best, etc., etc. So, you know, it's kind of like you can either choose to have the shelling style that you want, or you can choose to have 10 raw damage. Now, if you happen to be a normal shelling enjoyer, then you're in the clear because that's what the raw damage is. But again, it's like a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. It is what it is. I know that my reaction on stream, a lot of people were talking about, oh man, Rurikhan just being real mad. And it was just like, I was mostly mad because people were telling me that I was reading things wrong, and I wasn't, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So that's just an additional thing. Now, when it comes to Gogma-Artian, I think that a better way of doing it would be to be able to input additional materials from selected monsters, and that would influence the rolls a little bit more in your favor. I'm not saying to be completely deterministic, but just to skew the RNG in a certain direction a little bit more so that the goal is a little bit more achievable. Because right now, for instance, what I would like to have for my Gunland set bonus group bonus would be Ebony Doggo's set bonus combined with Lord Soul's group bonus. I don't even know what the odds are of getting that, but they're probably not very good. I was able to get Ebony's bonus, but not with Lord Soul. So now I'm just supposed to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And it would be great to have some degree of control to kind of like aim things in a direction and work towards something as opposed to just slot machine time the whole time. And this is kind of like my big criticism of Gog-Ardian. But like I said, I know some players enjoy it like that, and that's fine. Ultimately, you know, you don't need to super hyper min-max. I like to do that because I like this game, but it's just, the odds are just not going to be in my favor to do the stuff that I want to do, so it is what it is. Now, another system that also got introduced with Title Update 4, and this is a much cooler system in my opinion, is Transcendence. Now, Transcendence is something that you do to an armor piece, which it almost reminds me of what you used to do between the transition of high rank and G rank, which you would call limit break, where you would just like upgrade things beyond what they were designed to be upgraded. And in this case, Transcendence does some really cool stuff if you apply it to lower tier armor. So you can do it on rarity 7, 8 armors, and what you're going to get with that is your armor just becomes stronger in terms of like how much defense it provides. But if you do it on 5 and 6, what you get is you get additional slots for that piece of armor, making it viable to use in later game sets, which is really, really good because it gives you more freedom of how you want to build and all of that good stuff. So Transcendence actually really giga W when it comes to a really fun system. Now, another thing that Title Update 4 promised that it would bring is performance improvements. Now, I've actually been looking at previous footage from Title Update 3 and how that is working for me now, and there is a bit of a frame rate improvement in my case, but my GPU is always going to be on the lower end in terms of performance improvements because I have a 7900 XTX. The game is already running pretty decently for me, even though I do use frame gen. I know for a lot of people they're like, if you use frame gen, it doesn't count, whatever, so take that with whatever you want, with a grain of salt, whatever. I do FSR quality and I do frame gen simply because the quality is still very good and I get really good frame rate and I don't really feel too much input latency, so it works for me. I know that for some people it doesn't work, and I'm sorry, but I decided that in order to test this, I would use a one of my weaker GPUs that I have available to me, and that is the Streaming Rig GPU. Now, luckily enough, I still had footage from the previous Title Update. Well, actually, I think this is from Title Update 2, but Title Update 3 I don't think really had a whole lot in terms of performance improvements and all that. But in Title Update 2, I did a recording because I was testing out the performance to see how it was performing on that GPU. And then I tested it again, Title Update 4, pretty much under the same conditions. It was during a Lag-Yakris hunt. And you are seeing, with frame gen, like increases upwards of like 30 FPS with the Intel B580, which I know is not a super common GPU. Not a lot of people are using this GPU. I'm using it because it is the weakest GPU that I have on my PCs, just to see how things work out. Also, the process that I have on this computer is slightly above average because this is still a streaming rig, so you need decent processing power to be able to like record and stream and do all of that stuff. But noticeable performance improvements. As a matter of fact, you can even play it at native resolution with frame gen, so you don't need to use upscaling, and you're still getting like 50, 60 FPS at 1440p. In the previous test, I also tested it at 1080p, but I was pretty happy with the results at 1440p, which is what I would expect for a GPU like the B580. So I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. There's pretty decent improvements on there. But as with everything when it comes to PC, your mileage will absolutely vary, not just based on your hardware, but also based on what drivers you're in. Because as it turns out, it seems like some of the AMD drivers are having some issues, which interestingly enough, the AMD drivers are having issues with 2 of the games that I'm playing, because I'm also playing Path of Exile 2, and Path of Exile 2 was pretty much unplayable with the latest driver of AMD, because it would cause it to just get these ridiculous load times that quite simply would not end. So what I ended up doing was I downgraded to play Path of Exile 2, and then when I jumped into Monster Hunter, apparently I had, one of the better driver versions to play the game, so I didn't have any issues. I've heard a lot of people had issues with AMD drivers. It sucks. It sucks. Is it Capcom's fault? Is it the driver's manufacturer's fault? At this point, take your pick, because people like to say that I'm constantly defending Capcom, so you decide however you feel. I'm just letting you know, more than this game are having issues with the latest AMD drivers, more than this game are having issues with the latest NVIDIA drivers, and you do whatever you want with that particular information. Now, beyond that, we also have the Lumen Hymn Festival of Accord, which is, the usual festival stuff that we get. This time around, it is for Christmas and New Year. And personally, I think that the hub itself looks pretty neat, but there are certain sections of the hub that maybe are a little bit too exaggerated. However, the events themselves, those are pretty fun. Currently, the event went live last night, and the events that we had to do were like the 3 Blangongas, which is that event is just absolute chaos, and from that you get the Orion armor set. There's the Rathalos and the Guardian Rathalos quest. That one's pretty fun as well. A lot less chaotic and a lot easier to do. There was also a quest that I had missed, which was the one to do the meat dual blades, so I'm doing that one now as well. But I think it's just these 2 quests, and then there's also the tickets, there's the bowling stuff, but pretty fun stuff all around. Lots of armors for you to collect. The new armor looks absolutely gorgeous, the new event armor. There's also a new sacred skin for you to get, as per usual with all of the festivals. I think the festival's pretty fun, but overall I'm pretty happy with Title Update 4. I think there's a lot of content here to grind, and I'm looking forward to what else is coming to Monster Hunter Wilds. But next year, we're also going to be jumping into Stories 3, and we'll also see how the January update improves performance, hopefully in the February update, Arc-Tempered Arc-Veld, all of that stuff. But right now, it's just I'm coming up on a really busy season, Christmas season, as you guys can imagine. So I just wanted to get this video done to give you guys my thoughts on everything Title Update 4. Let me know how you guys feel about it in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.